Welcome back, Show and BK on the Chiefs. That voice you're hearing right now is not Ron the Show Hughley. It is myself, Brandon, Kiley, and Stephen Serda taking care of you guys today. Hoping to have Ron back in with us next week. Chiefs are in an interesting position right now. You're 4-0, and the vibes could not be any worse. People around the league are looking at the Chiefs, and they are saying, I think justifiably, the team looks vulnerable. Rashee Rice might be out for the season, might be out for a few weeks. We got an update earlier today, and it sounds like he's going to be waiting until next week to get further testing. Best I can tell, Serda, it seems like he does not have a torn ACL, but they don't know the extent of the damage because of the amount of swelling that's going on in the knee right now. So we'll see with that. You don't have Isaiah Pacheco. Your offensive line has not been what you expected. Your all-pro, all-everything, greatest quarterback in the history of the game is not playing like himself. The defense, while still really good, maybe isn't what it was a year ago. And so you look at all of this, and it's like, all right, you're 4-0, and you should feel good about it. And yet this week, the vibes are about as low as they've been in Chiefs Kingdom in as long as I can remember.
Yeah, and so just for full transparency, we're recording this episode on Thursday afternoon, and it was just announced that the Kansas City Chiefs have placed wide receiver Rashee Rice on IR. So
there you go.
It's going to be at least 4 games. But that I don't think that should be a shock to anybody based on whether or not you want to believe the Twitter doctors. I don't know if they're real doctors. I don't think any of us know if any of them have any idea what they're talking about. But there seems to be very varying opinions on whether or not they would actually be able to tell if he has a torn ACL with all the swelling that's in his knee. But then they say, like, if it's a bone bruise or whatever, it could be 3 to 4 weeks. Well, the Chiefs just guaranteed he's going to miss at least four games. But hopefully that's all that it is. I don't know how long they're going to drag this out for. Supposedly he's going to see an expert like early next week. So hopefully we have some answers by then. But best case scenario is that it's just not season ending at this point. If he has to miss 6 weeks or 7 weeks or 8 weeks, I think you're fine with that as long as he's available later in the season.
Let's start here. This sucks, man. Like, it's brutal because Rashee Rice was on pace to have one of the best seasons by a Chiefs wide receiver in franchise history. This is including the game that he effectively did nothing in because of the injury. He was on pace for 100 receptions, 1,200 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns this season, which would have gone down again as one of the best seasons by any wide receiver ever. He looked faster. He looked more decisive. He looked like he had amazing chemistry this year, especially against zone defenses with Patrick Mahomes. He looked like he had figured out what his role was going to be in this offense and how to best utilize what he was in this offense. So that is a massive piece, to put it lightly, that the Chiefs are going to be without. Whether it's 4 weeks, 8 weeks, the rest of the year, whatever it might be. And sort of this was an offense that was already without Pacheco. They were already without Hollywood Brown. And now you're without your number one wide receiver in Rashee Rice. It is a similar position in some ways to where they were at last year, where you just had nothing that you trusted at the receiver core. But you had this young, up-and-coming, top 50 pick at wide receiver with Rashee Rice that you could bet on. And at the time, you had question marks, at least, with, hey, can Sky Moore become a little bit more? We felt like the answer was probably no, but you could at least dream on it a bit. That's done. He should never see the field again after that drop from last week. The Kadarius Toney thing was frustrating as all get out, but you knew he had all the talent in the world, and if it was ever going to work, you wanted to see it happen here. And so last year you could kind of slow play things, and you could just take a wait and see approach to it. You could get to the end of the trade deadline, trade for McCole Hardman, and you say, let's see how this goes. We might have the defense. We might have the weapons to make this thing work. And ultimately, they got to the Super Bowl. They win it. We know how the story ended. My opinion on where they're at right now is very different. I don't think you can take a wait and see approach. Even if you find out, hey, Rashee Rice is likely to make it back this season, you've got to make a move for a wide receiver, man. Even with Rashee on the field, this offense was not looking like itself. It wasn't explosive. Things weren't moving well. Mahomes looked frustrated again at times. I think this offense is missing another key ingredient. It should have been Hollywood Brown. And then he gets hurt on the first catch that he makes as a Chief in the preseason. Serda, to me, this is a team that desperately needs to make a move for a wide receiver. It doesn't have to be at the level of Devontae Adams, but they've got to go out there and make a move for a wide receiver.
And you see the reports that like Chiefs are monitoring the Davante Adams situation as if the Raiders would ever trade him to the Chiefs. I think the only way I think the Raiders would trade Davante Adams to the Chiefs is if like the Chiefs take on his contract like in full and then also just like give them a bunch of draft picks or something, which is not something like Davante Adams hasn't looked like the special kind of player that he has been in the past this season. So I'm totally fine with that. And when the injury first happened on on Monday, when we're all reacting to it and all kind of down and trying to figure out like and wait for reports and see what's going on with Rashee Rice, I was telling myself like, I just don't think they're going to do it. Like the Chiefs have always stayed away from these kinds of moves. And the Kadarius Toney one was a cost-effective move because it's a former first-round pick guy who is on his rookie contract, and so it's easy. But all of these guys we're talking about like veteran players, unless you go after a third, fourth tier guy like Darius Slayton or something like that. But like Amari Cooper, Davante Adams, like Deontay Johnson, all these names that are being thrown around right now, those guys aren't going to be cheap to acquire, and they're not going to be cheap to pay. But it does feel like this season where it's like the last few years, it's like Chiefs are figuring it out. Chiefs are figuring it out. Draft and develop. Build on the defensive side of the ball. Like we've seen all that manifest in the back-to-back Super Bowls. But it's kind of like, are they ever just going to go all in? And like, if they are going to go all in, like, wouldn't this be the season to do it where you thought you were set up to have one of the best offenses in the NFL? Hollywood Brown goes down. Now Rashee Rice is out of the mix, and that seems to be unraveling. Isaiah Pacheco is out for an extended period of time. And at this point, I'm not confident in the offense at all after we just saw an entire regular season where they looked like one of the most dysfunctional offenses in all of the NFL. So I am on board with it. On Monday, I don't think I was. And as the week's gone on, I'm more like, you know what? It just makes sense. Like you have a chance to make NFL history. And if you can get Rashee Rice back, if Hollywood Brown somehow is available in the postseason or something, that could be a huge boost to you down the stretch. And then, you know, for certain, as long as everything goes well with Isaiah Pacheco's recovery, he should be back later on in the year. So you still feel confident about them later on in the year, but it's like, can you just buy time the way that they did last season where you kind of limp through the regular season, but you're still confident the Chiefs are going to be in the playoffs? I don't know that you can totally pull that off again, because while the defense has still been tremendous, I don't think this is like a generational kind of defense like they had last season. So it feels like it's like if we're talking about NFL history, Super Bowl 3P on the line, like why not just go all in and say, screw it, we'll figure the rest out later. We got a chance to be one of the greatest teams in NFL history.
Also, the guy that you acquire might be somebody that you keep around. Like Hollywood Brown is on a 1-year deal, man. I think we've seen this year, and I like Xavier Worthy. I think he's going to be a good player for the Chiefs. He's a secondary piece, right? We're going to go to him 3 to 4 times a game. He is for the Chiefs what Jameson Williams is for the Lions. Well, the Lions also have, on top of Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is their version of Rashee Rice. They have Sam Laporta, who is their version of Travis Kelce. And Travis Kelce is getting to the end of his career here in Kansas City. We know that. You're going to have to replace that with something. And I don't know if that's the guy that you're going out to acquire this year at the deadline, or if that's somebody that will be here down the road. Maybe it's next year's first-round draft pick. Regardless, you need to put yourself into position to do, as Serda said, make history this year, and then see if maybe it's something that can work for you down the road. There's a lot of names that are getting thrown out there. Amari Cooper is the guy that I think he makes the most sense. Like if you're just saying, hey, who is the player that can help you the most, that is the most realistic, and you think could actually happen for the Chiefs? I think it's Amari Cooper. That's based on his contract status right now. He makes nothing the rest of the season. He could be effectively added for almost no cap hit whatsoever. And the Browns aren't good. They have really no reason for him at this point. They went out and added wide receivers in the offseason as well, and they know they're not a legitimate contender this year. So that makes a lot of sense for both sides of it. But beyond that, like DeAndre Hopkins is maybe a guy that could be bandied about. He's on a team that doesn't know how to utilize wide receivers this year because their quarterback stinks. Deontay Johnson has been discussed. The Panthers aren't doing anything of significance this year, and I think at this point they'll be ready to admit that. And even if it's not one of those players, a guy that I think is really interesting, Serda, and I have not heard his name brought up very much. The contract is the most difficult part to get around here. But Christian Kirk plays for an offense in Jacksonville that is some variation of what Andy Reid does. It's the Doug Peterson offense, which is just basically a carbon copy of what he did in Kansas City with Andy. Christian Kirk does a lot of the things that Rashee Rice did well. He can go across the middle, but he also adds a little bit of a deep element to that. The Chiefs were also potentially interested in Christian Kirk whenever he is a free agent, and then the Jaguars went out there and paid him a boatload of money. He's somebody that I would be interested in, and that probably makes up the entire top tier of wide receivers that could be available. Beyond that, it's like Darius Slayton, Tyler Boyd, and I don't know, like Demarcus Robinson has been brought up as another guy that they've had in previously that would be the equivalent of bringing in McCole last year. I think you need to aim higher. To me, the guys that I would be most interested in are Amari Cooper and Christian Kirk if you can make the money work.
Yeah, I think Demarcus Robinson would be easy. At one, I don't think the Rams can afford to trade Demarcus Robinson with all the wide receiver injuries that they have right now. And it's just like, does Demarcus Robinson actually improve the situation for the Chiefs? Because I don't think it really does. Like,
he's a worse version of Justin Watson.
Yeah. And it's like, and like Darius Slayton, like he's a guy that I would have been interested in the offseason because he was cheap and then he re-signed with the Giants for whatever reason. And like he's flashed at times, but he's an inconsistent player in the NFL at best. Like I would be curious about Deontay Johnson if the Panthers would actually move him because they're awful and they're the worst team in the league. But it's like, why would the Panthers go out and trade for Deontay Johnson just to ship him within the same calendar year to the Chiefs? And it's like, I think the answer is Amari Cooper if you're going to go do anybody, because I don't think Devontae Adams is even realistic. And at this point, I'd rather have Amari Cooper than Devontae Adams. It seems like Devontae Adams wants to go to the Jets or nowhere else. And so that would make the most sense. That would be the most intriguing thing, because I do agree that it's not, it can't just be, we just got to buy time and figure this thing out and hope we piece it together down the line this season. It's got to be somebody who can come in and actually have an impact, because all of those guys outside of the top tier, the guys that are on the trade block right now, aren't going to do anything for you. And then you talk about coming in and trying to learn a new offense, especially the Andy Reid offense. Like we're talking weeks down the line before that person is even fully implemented in the offense in any kind of way. So it's like, go get the guys that they would manufacture touches for, not guys that are going to have to come in and play a handful of snaps for the next month before they actually see any legitimate playing time.
I'm glad you mentioned how long it's going to take to potentially learn this offense, because that's why I think you kind of need to find out what you need to know about Rashee Rice's knee next week. Like it sounds like they're going to get their second opinions. They should have all the information that's necessary there. That will determine exactly the kind of replacement that you need. Do you need a guy that's just going to take on the Rashee Rice role? And just for the rest of this season, you are our new Rashee Rice because we no longer have him available to us? Or do you need somebody that could be a complementary piece to Rashee whenever he returns to the field? And the answer to that question should influence what you're going out there to acquire. But either way, dude, I think this might be the kind of thing that you need to do next week, especially if Rashee Rice is out for the rest of the season. Like during the bye, go ahead and get this done so you give yourself a greater amount of runway to be able to get that guy incorporated into the offense. Think about how long it took for Kadarius Toney to get real meaningful reps. And I understand Kadarius Toney is a very specific circumstance with the way that he goes about things, but it's not necessarily a plug and play the way that you would think with this offense. It's going to take some time. And if that gives them 10 weeks or so to really incorporate that guy, ease him in early on, and then over time work him in as like the number one guy into the offense, this needs to get done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's, I think I mentioned it last week, like the Chiefs, after I was kind of complaining about their early season bye, seems like it's actually kind of a lucky thing now. Like they kind of need the time to put in some work and try to figure out what they're going to do next and try to get some of these guys healthy, because I wasn't expecting them to be this banged up through 4 weeks of the NFL season.
The Chiefs have about 4 weeks now until we get to the trade deadline. The deadline this year is right after the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. So week 9 is when the trade deadline will take place. I don't think that they can play this the way that they did a year ago. You can't take that same wait and see approach. It's time to get aggressive. All right. When the Chiefs have the ball, Chiefs versus the New Orleans Saints. It's a Monday night football game at Arrowhead Stadium between the Chiefs and the Saints. And we got to continue our conversation with the wide receiver position because whoever it ends up being that they trade for, they do have to play this game without Rashee Rice, and they will have to play this game without adding anybody from the outside. I think when you get into this one, Serda, a lot of people are going to be expecting, okay, this is the week that we see Xavier Worthy really increase his role. He's going to get more targets. He's going to take on a lot of the Rashee Rice role. Maybe not like going across the middle, but those targets. I think people are going to be disappointed. I would like to see him get some of those crossing routes. Some. But he's also like 170 pounds soaking wet, and I don't anticipate him taking all of them. The guy that I think you're going to see have a pretty significant increase in his role is JuJu Smith-Schuster. He was brought in as insurance, and now it's time to take out that insurance policy. I don't think it's going to be anywhere close to as effective as what they had in Rashee Rice, but it would not surprise me at all if we get out of this game and the leading wide receiver in targets for the Chiefs against the New Orleans Saints is JuJu Smith-Schuster with like 6 or 7 targets on the day.
Yeah, now that JuJu signing seems pretty important,
right?
We talked about it a couple weeks ago on the Daily Fix, like that touchdown that JuJu had a couple weeks back. Like he showed a little bit more, and that was because Rashee Rice got banged up for a second and had to come out of the game, and they said he just like got the wind knocked out of him or whatever. But that would have been a Rashee Rice touchdown, and it was a JuJu touchdown. Like that was a total Rashee Rice route that JuJu was able to find the end zone on, and I think show a little bit more speed than I think we had. Like I don't know if he can do that for 90% of the snaps or something like that. Like there is going to be a heavy rotation, I think, at wide receiver moving forward. But JuJu's going to be the guy. Like we've seen him do it for the Chiefs before, and he's not the same player that he was a couple of seasons ago. But he's going to be the most consistent. He's going to be the most reliable. Like, JuJu's going to be lined up in the right spot. He's got chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes is going to be able to trust him. And that like, hey, I'm going to put the ball here. So be in that spot. Like JuJu is that guy. Sky Moore's not that guy. Like Justin Watson, we know exactly what Justin Watson is. And we saw what it looked like last year when Justin Watson had a game where he had like 9 targets. Like JuJu, outside of Worthy still got all the potential in the world, but he isn't Rashee Rice, and he can't play the same role that Rashee Rice can. JuJu still got the build, even if he doesn't have the speed anymore and the reliability. So yeah, he's probably not going to rip off, 20 yards after contact like Rashee Rice can, but he can get you 8 yards. He can help you move the chains, and he can be in the right spot. And that's all you really need. You just need to be a functional offense that can pick up first downs, because they're not going to be that explosive aside from a couple of deep shots to Worthy a game in all likelihood.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see a healthy dose of Travis Kelce, that's for sure. We saw that last week after Rashee Rice went down. You'll see that a little bit more this week. I think you'll see a couple extra targets going in the direction of Xavier Worthy. That's to be expected. But I think a bulk of this load is going to go to JuJu Smith-Schuster. I was just looking last year at the second game of the season, the first game that we saw Travis Kelce play. It was against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the targets from that game. Sky Moore had 4, Justin Watson had 5, Noah Gray had 3, Kadarius Toney had 5, Travis Kelce 9, Jerick McKinnon 3, Rashee Rice 2, Clyde 2, MVS 3, Donovan Smith 1, Richie James 1, Isaiah Pacheco 2. The nice thing about where they're at this year, if there is a silver lining to it, I don't think you're going to see that again. I think you could see the running backs and tight ends maybe get involved, but you're not going to have like 6 wide receivers that end up getting targeted in this game. I do think things have been consolidated in a way where they know who they can trust, and they're not going to overdo it by just cycling through everybody. There came a point in time last year where they said, okay, we've got to settle on 3 or 4 wide receivers that we're willing to play and then just target those guys. I do think that the Chiefs are already there, even with this this Rashee Rice injury. So you're not going to have to go through those same struggles early on this year that you did a year ago.
And maybe they elevate Nico Remigio or Justin Ross or something, and one of those players finally manifests into some kind of role in the offense. I don't think it's probably going to happen. I'm sure they'll add somebody because they probably got an extra roster spot right now. But I don't think that's going to add any type of significance to the offense. I think it is going to be JuJu's probably going to be the guy, and then everybody else is going to be rotated in. And like you mentioned, the Jerick McKinnon targets, like I think that's what's going to wind up being huge for this offense is that Kareem Hunt coming back into the mix, and he's not the same player that he used to be, but he looked more reliable last week than Carson Steele did. Like he was running harder than I thought he would have at almost 30 years old. And he gives them, and along with Samaje Perine, like him and Hunt together in the passing game, like there's going to be a lot of that moving forward. I think we're going to see a lot of those Jerick McKinnon design screens that we saw be so effective for the Chiefs offense moving forward. And then, maybe Noah Gray is going to be in the mix a little bit here, but I think I tend to think a lot of those targets are going to go to the running backs more so than any of the wide receivers are going to take out a huge chunk of the offense.
Speaking of the running backs, when you're going up against the New Orleans Saints, they have a very good pass defense. They have struggled on the ground. Now, if you just look at the overall yards allowed on the season, it's going to look impressive. A lot of that is because they whipped up on the Panthers and the Cowboys in the first couple of weeks, and they never ran the ball. On a yards per carry basis, they are 26th in the league in yards per carried allowed as a defense. This is the game where Kareem Hunt should be utilized to the fullest extent of what he has capable. Like, Isaiah Pacheco is expected back in a few weeks, allegedly. Broke his leg. I don't know how you do that as a running back, but apparently it's only a few weeks left on his injury timeline. Kareem Hunt should get the ball like potentially 20 times in this game. I appreciate what Carson Steele is. I appreciate how quickly he has emerged as a legitimate option as an undrafted free agent running back at the NFL level. But he's got to figure out this ball security stuff, and he is somebody that should be utilized within a very specific role, man. If you're at the goal line, go ahead and put Carson Steele in there. If you need a 3rd and 1, put him in there as a battering ram. Have no problem with that whatsoever. On basically every other play of significance, I want to see Kareem Hunt and Samaje Perine as your two-headed monster in the backfield. Samaje Perine is the 3rd down back. Kareem Hunt gets the first 2 downs. Let's see what they look like in that regard. But this should be a game where it sounds strange given the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes as their starting quarterback, and I'm typically throw the ball around guy. Not this week, man. Not against this team. Not given the Chiefs' current situation at the wide receiver position. You should be running the hell out of the football. Establish it on the ground this week with Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Kareem Hunt, the last few years in Cleveland, has played the Samaje Perine role behind Nick Chubb. Like he is a better pass catching back than Isaiah Pacheco is. Like that is where Kareem Hunt can thrive and give you something different in this offense. And we know that's where Samaje Perine can thrive. But I think Kareem Hunt even offers more just like vision wise as an actual runner than Perine does. Like it's crazy that Kareem Hunt was not even on a football team, and now we're sitting here talking about him like he's going to be the focal point of the offense.
Dude, he legitimately looked good last week.
Yeah, like he didn't look like. I don't think that Kareem Hunt is all of a sudden going to have this like massive career resurgence here that now that he's returned home to Kansas City, but he looked a lot better than I would have expected because I watched a lot of Kareem Hunt in Cleveland over the last couple of years, and he looked slow and looked like he had just lost all of his explosiveness. And then he did say last week when he spoke to the media that he was fighting through a hernia last season that he kept playing through and then had to have surgery or whatever during the offseason. And so maybe there was something to that. Like he wasn't totally healthy, but he wanted to make sure that he didn't get cut and wind up like being out of the league or something, which is why it took him a while to get signed this season. But he looked better last week than I think he did at any point throughout the entirety of last season with the Cleveland Browns. And it's like, can you just get that from him on a consistent basis? And then, put in Carson Steele in the short yardage battering ram situations. Then you got Hunt and Perine and pass blocking, and they can go out and catch passes and make plays that way. And then hopefully you free things up for Travis Kelce and take a couple of shots a game to Xavier Worthy, because we've already turned the page, I think, from they've returned to the explosive high flying offense to, okay, this has got to be a conservative offense and they just can't hurt themselves.
Man, how fun was week 1? That was great, dude.
Yeah, like I am totally on board with that now. Just stop turning the football over and take the points where you can get them, because I think that's all they're capable of doing now.
Yeah, and the nice thing is this week against the Saints, and we'll get to the defensive side of the ball here in just a little bit. I don't think the Saints are I think the first couple of weeks of the year were an outlier. I don't think that's who the Saints are offensively. I think you can win this game by scoring, 23 points, and that's what this offense is right now, is they can get you to about 23 or so. But one thing that has to improve as we continue along with the Chiefs and when they have the ball against the Saints defense, this offensive line just has to be better, man. And I'm talking specifically as a pass blocking unit. I think the run blocking has mostly been fine this year. I haven't noticed them in a significant way, which is a good thing as a fan when you're watching the games. Pass blocking, I thought there was a really good thread that was put out on Twitter earlier this week by Mitchell Schwartz, where he broke down Patrick Mahomes. There's been a lot of talk about his happy feet, right? And how he's moving from the pocket too quickly. He's bailing from clean pockets. And that's true. It is happening at times in the second half, but there's a reason for it. And it's because in the first half, especially last week against the Chargers, he's getting pressured like that. And it's up the middle. It's going up against guys like Joe Tooney and Trey Smith, these guys that we think of as very good offensive linemen. And I think generally speaking, for the most part, they've been okay. It's just one of those things where it feels like on any given play, it's somebody different that's making a small mistake that leads to a clean pass rusher getting to Patrick Mahomes. And that's the kind of stuff that just has to get fixed. And it, in the past, for the most part, has been something that gets fixed. They do a pretty good job of cleaning this stuff up across the offensive line, whether it's stunts that are giving them issues, whatever it might be. They typically get this fixed midway through the year, but right now they're not in a great spot as a pass blocking unit. I wonder if some of that is because they didn't really get reps together during the preseason. Like Wanye and Joe Tooney basically took no reps with the first unit. They've got to be better against this New Orleans Saints defensive line, and this should be a good spot for them. The Saints don't have a particularly ferocious defensive front that is going to get after you in any way.
Yeah, and I do wonder, Tooney is getting older, and he missed a lot of training camp with an injury that he was trying to heal from over the offseason. And then I do think that, like, Trey Smith, we see all the highlights of Trey Smith, like, pancaking guys, and he's amazing. But I think it's kind of the thing with him throughout his career is, like, he's got these highlight blocks, and at times he looks like he's one of the absolute best guards in football, but then he's inconsistent sometimes, and sometimes he seems to struggle. And it is frustrating because the interior is supposed to be the part of the offensive line we don't have to worry about. Yeah. Like, the tackles are where things are supposed to be iffy. And honestly, Wanye, aside from a couple of bad reps, like, I didn't think he was too bad against the Chargers. Juwan Taylor, I think it's just who he is. Like, he's always going to be up and down, and you hope you just get him on a good day and he doesn't cause a bunch of penalties or something like that. But the interior of the offensive line was supposed to be the one thing that you could bank on. Like, those three guys on the middle are in the conversation for best three interior offensive linemen in the NFL. And I do think that some of that has to do with Patrick Mahomes' inconsistencies, because we're seeing him bail out of clean pockets a lot. But I think it's because on the plays where he does have pressure, it's kind of spooking him into being like, I just got to get out of the pocket and make a play with my legs or something like that. And so they got to make sure that he feels safe back there, because we need Patrick Mahomes to turn this thing on too and make sure he can keep the ship afloat. So yeah, the offensive line absolutely has to play better. And honestly, if this is the kind of play they get out of Wanye the rest of the way, I'd be fine with that. But those three guys in the middle have to play better.
And this week, you're not going up against a top 5 defensive line. Like, you saw better pass rushers against Cincinnati, against Atlanta. You saw a better pass rusher against Baltimore that, at least as a unit, have a better pass rush plan. This week should be a little better in that regard. It's Carl Granderson on one side, and he's good, but Chase Young's their primary other edge rusher. We've seen him. You can get after him, especially with some of the run game stuff that the Chiefs will do. And then on the interior, they're fine. There's not any one individual guy that you have to worry about too much. One guy that you typically have to worry about in their defense is Demario Davis. And best I can tell, it doesn't look like he's going to play in this one against the Chiefs. So it seems like they might be able to avoid who is typically their best defender on that side of the ball.
And I will say, for Chiefs fans pointing out like how much the Chiefs miss Willie Gay. Willie Gay has not started the season as a full-time player for the Saints. He's basically playing the exact same role that he played in Kansas City as like a part-time coverage linebacker who can make some athletic plays. But Demarai Davis is out. I expect Willie Gay to see a lot more time in this one, but he started the season as a backup for the Saints. He wasn't a clear-cut day one starter for their defense.
It'll be interesting. And stay tuned for that. We don't get the full report until later on in the week for the Monday night game. All right, that's when the Chiefs have the ball. When the Saints have the ball, I think we come out on differing sides on this one, Serda, because I don't think the Saints have a top 5 offense in the NFL. I do, however, think if you're just looking at trios in the NFL that scare you as a defense, they're pretty high up there because Chris Olave is a stud. Rashid Shaheed has emerged as more than just a downfield deep threat for them. And Alvin Kamara has suddenly become like prime Alvin Kamara again. I don't know where this came from. I want to start with their wide receivers because that's really been the surprise for them so far this year. Olave and Shaheed are giving everybody nightmares. How do you feel like the Chiefs match up against those two wide receivers on the outside?
I think that they are both very talented. And I think that Clint Kubiak has done a good job because the Saints offense, despite talent last season, was one of the most frustrating to watch in the NFL. And this season, they are certainly better. And Clint Kubiak has a lot to do with that. But I just think they're kind of soft. Like, I think because you talk about Clint Kubiak and, and some of it's, not too far off from like the Mike McDaniel, like motion offense in Miami. Like the Saints just run a ton of motion and they try to get those guys moving because Olave and Shaheed are explosive and they can create separation in a hurry. And so they send those guys in motion and have them moving before the snap a ton to try to get these free releases off the line of scrimmage. And it's like, but they're not strong wide receivers. Like they're not guys that are going to overpower you like some of these other bigger body guys. Like AJ Brown just overpowers everybody in the NFL. Like there's nobody who can just like go up against him and try to out physical him. Like the Saints pass catchers aren't that. And I think the Chiefs are much more physical in the secondary. And I think the way you slow down these motion offenses is by just beating those dudes up at the snap, like right at the line of scrimmage. And we've seen the Chiefs do that a lot. We know that Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson and everybody in that secondary is going to be really physical. And that's been their MO the last 2 seasons. I think not discounting the talent of Olave and Shaheed. I think they're both tremendous players. I think the Chiefs are just a brutal matchup for them. I think the Chiefs are just going to out physical them the entire contest. And I think it's going to be tougher on their passing game than most people might project ahead of Monday night.
Man, it's funny because I think that the Chiefs can match up pretty well with Olave. Like he's going to get his. He's going to be really good in this game for the most part. He'll have moments where it's frustrating to watch. But the guy that scares the hell out of me is Rashid Shaheed. Because it wouldn't surprise me if they utilize Trent McDuffie a lot on Olave. That's their clear-cut number 1 option. Shaheed going up against the Chiefs' number 2 corner, whether that's Jalen Watson or Joshua Williams or whoever they decide to use at any given time. They rotate them more than I'm comfortable with, honestly. Najee Johnson has been seeing more time than I expected to this season. Whoever is against Rashid Shaheed, that's the matchup to me that scares me. That's the matchup to me that if I was Steve Spagnuolo would keep me up at night. And this, like, they always work in tandem, but this is where the pass rush can really help because most of the Shaheed routes that scare you are going to take a little bit of time to develop because they're going over the top. He can gain ground quickly, and if you don't end up keeping up with him, it's going for a touchdown. It's going over your head. So for me, that's the one that scares me the most is what Shaheed can do against your number 2 cornerback.
Yeah, and he's been great this year. Like the last 2 years, they had just used him as like a part-time player, go out there and just run straight down the field. And now they're actually using him in lots of ways and just trying to get him the football because Clint Kubiak realized how explosive he is. And like, he's not just a downfield threat. Like he can be an all around weapon for the offense. So yeah, I think that's the tougher matchup. But again, I just think that the Chiefs defense is just going to push them around. And I think they're going to make everything hard for them. And I don't think there's going to be any free releases for those dudes off the line of scrimmage.
All right. If that doesn't scare you, what should, as a Chiefs fan, is the idea of Alvin Kamara in their offense and what he can do both on the ground and through the air. Sort of the Chiefs defense has been really good against opposing running backs so far this year. Alvin Kamara is a special player. I think that the Chiefs should do a pretty good job against him on the ground. What scares me much more is what they can do against him through the air. Because Kamara, we know from his history, is a unique talent in that regard. He's a guy that can take a catch that's right at the line of scrimmage and gain 35 yards with it. And it just breaks one tackle and he's gone. This year, he's been targeted 20 times. He's caught 17 of them. He has 175 yards and a touchdown. He has already broken one play of 50-plus yards through the air. Sort of, how do you handle this? Because I look at the Chiefs' defense, and I'm trying to search for answers against a guy like Kamara, and I don't have any right now. I don't know what you do.
And just dedicate Justin Reed or Brian Cook or somebody to watch Kamara out of the backfield.
Well, once you do that, now I got to worry about that deep passing game that we were just talking about. Now I don't have a safety deep with him.
Because even like Chamari Connor, even though I love Chamari Connor and I love what he's done this season,
you ready to see some broken tackles?
He's still been inconsistent. He's still. You can see in coverage where it's like Chamari Connor can make plays and he is like this ball hawk kind of player who can go out there and be around the football and help create turnovers. And he's been really good at that through the first few weeks of the season. But in coverage, he gets left in the dust a lot. And Kamara against any of the linebackers, I mean, I think can we get Drew Tranquil to play better? Because Tranquil has been one of the biggest disappointments on the defense this season. I know Nick Bolton and Leo have been great the last few weeks, but we know what their limitations are in the passing game. And the Saints are not afraid to give Alvin Kamara 12 to 15 targets in the passing game. Like, they will absolutely do that. Alvin Kamara's got a bunch of double-digit reception games in his career, and he's fully capable of doing that.
And Derek Carr is not afraid to just dump it down on every play. In fact, that's what he would love to do. He would love nothing more.
He'll pepper him with targets. And the way Kamara has played that way this season, and he looks more explosive than he did at any point last season. And they've done a really good job of scheming those looks up. That's by far the biggest matchup concern for me, is what they can do to try to slow him down, because I'm confident in the run defense now. Through 4 weeks, I'm pretty confident they can shut him down on the ground, but I think he is a matchup nightmare in the passing game for them.
I'm in total agreement with you. Among NFL linebackers that have taken at least 130 passing snaps this year, Drew Tranquil is the lowest graded linebacker in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus. He has a grade of 30 on their scale of 0 to 100 in terms of his coverage grade this year. He's been terrible against the pass, and I don't totally understand what happened there, because I felt like he was at a minimum passable in that area last year. And honestly, for most of the season, I felt like he was pretty good. And maybe that's just like when you're comparing him to what we had previously seen in coverage with Hitchens and Bolton and some of the other guys that they've had, it was like, oh my God, this guy can like get to the ball, make a tackle, and they don't gain extra ground against him. This year, it's been kind of tough to watch at times with him being in coverage. He's been left in the dust. I don't know what's going on there. Hopefully this is the week where he gets back on track, but I think you're 100% correct. If I'm a Saints coach this week, and I'm trying to put together a game plan against the Chiefs, I am targeting Alvin Kamara 12 plus times in the passing game. That has to be like, if he doesn't have at least 12 targets in the passing game this week, I think something went awry for the Saints.
And even last week against the Chargers, like, they had that wheel route to Dobbins that, like, Herbert it was like a beautiful throw, and Dobbins just dropped it. Otherwise, like, that might have been a touchdown. Like the Saints are going to dial those things up for Alvin Kamara, and you know, it's up for debate whether or not Derek Carr is going to make the pass and be able to make the plays to get to create those big gains against the Chiefs. And we know, like, Derek Carr's history against the Chiefs, but he's had some big games against the Chiefs in the past. And Alvin Kamara is really, really good. Like, outside of Bijan Robinson, and I think you could even make the case that Alvin Kamara, until Bijan Robinson really puts it all together, like Alvin Kamara through 4 games of this season has been better than Bijan Robinson. And he has been better as a pass catcher than almost any other running back in the NFL because Christian McCaffrey is hurt right now. Like, he's been tremendous this season.
Do you remember the game that was a few years ago? I think this was right after Mahomes got hurt, if I'm not mistaken. The Chiefs went up against the Packers, and Aaron Jones just went nuts through the air. Aaron Rodgers was just targeting him at will, and they were attacking the Chiefs linebackers in coverage, and they ended up beating the Chiefs accordingly. That is the game plan that I am most fearful of going into this one, is what happened to them. I think that was 2018, if I'm not mistaken, against Aaron Jones. And could we see some kind of a recreation of that game with Alvin Kamara? Last thing that I wanted to get to here, when the Saints have the ball against the Chiefs Monday Night Football this week, the Saints offensive line is not very good. And one way that you can avoid some of the things that we've been talking about, it makes hitting Rashid Shaheed downfield really difficult. It makes it harder to hit Alvin Kamara in the middle of the field, is for Chris Jones to just go out there and completely dominate this game. I think Chris Jones has played like a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate so far. And there have been drives, more of them this year than I feel like there were at this point last year, where he just wrecks everything. There's a couple of plays where he wrecks everything. Even against the run, I think he's been better this year. If you're going into this game with Cesar Ruiz, their center, out, and they already have a below league average offensive line, even with him in there, this should be the type of game where Chris Jones goes in and just has a day. Like a sack, 4 hurries, couple of tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage, and just overall is completely wrecking the game plan. That is something that is very much in play for Chris Jones in this kind of a game.
If they get this version of Chris Jones all season long, I think he is the defensive player of the year. Like, he has been that good through 4 games. And I know there's a lot of good edge rushers in the league right now.
That's going to be the hard thing, is just putting up the numbers that'll be able to match like a TJ Watt.
Yeah. And Max Crosby has been a little bit banged up, so he's off to a little bit of a slow start. Micah Parsons is hurt now, but like Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett's been banged up. Like, some of these top end edge rushers have been banged up, but TJ Watt's still TJ Watt, and he's still making plays week after week. But like, I think you can make the case that Chris Jones, just from an individual defensive standpoint, has been the biggest defensive game changer in the NFL through the first 4 games. Like, I just don't see on a weekly basis, like, he is just absolutely wrecking snap after snap after snap. Like, I don't think I've ever seen him play this consistently for this long of a stretch, because that's always been the knock on him, is like he disappears for stretches of times. Through 4 contests, like, I'm struggling to find a single snap where it's not like Chris Jones isn't having an impact when the defense is on the field. Like, he has been an absolute game wrecker, and that should continue. And again, Chris Jones has a lot of success against Derek Carr. So I'm looking forward to Chris Jones absolutely decimating the Saints offensive line and sacking Derek Carr multiple times on Monday night.
It's been kind of fun to see him have the freedom this year too, where he's just like calling out a matchup right before they decide to snap the ball. He's like, I'm going to go up against that dude.
Yeah.
That is my,
you imagine being that offensive line.
Oh no. and in this game, like, they've got a couple of tackles that you should be able to exploit. They've got a center that is not their typical center going into this game. Like, Jones is gonna be able to go out there and pick his matchups, and depending on where he wants to go, they'll be able to get him some opportunities. So I think he is the guy that can do that. The edge rushers have been a little disappointing to start out the season. I think Tershawn Wharton has had a really good start to the year, though. This is a Chris game. It's got to start and finish with him, because it's going to be hard to blitz too often when you've got to worry about Alvin Kamara. It's going to be hard to blitz your safeties when you've got that threat of the deep pass at any moment to Rashid Shaheed. They need Chris Jones to be able to be a one-man wrecking crew. He's been that so far this year, and this is another week where they need him to step up. All right. It is time for Ron's favorite game, the game that he says is sweeping the nation. Certified or imposter? Serda, my question for you this week for certified or imposter is this. Travis Kelce still has enough left in the tank to be the number 1 receiving option for the Chiefs for the remainder of the regular season? Is it certified or imposter that Kelce has enough in the tank to be their number one receiving option, not in the postseason, but for the rest of this regular season? Certified or imposter?
I'm going to go with certified, and really it's out of necessity because they need him to. Like they just need to be able to be like, "Hey Trav, sorry. We know we said we were going to slow play you this regular season, but we couldn't anticipate all the injuries that we were going to have, so we're going to need to give you like 14 targets this week." And I think the Saints are a good matchup, so it's an opportunity for them to get Kelce involved coming off of his best game of the season. And I know Kelce always smokes the Chargers, but this is a good matchup for him and for Noah Gray, like for the Chiefs tight ends. Like the Saints are a below average tight end defense. Like that's a matchup they can win on Monday night. So I don't know that he still has it, but he has still shown the pop. Like he's had the explosive plays. The first couple of weeks, there's a couple of plays that came back because of penalties and whatever. And then last week he finally put it together and looked like his old self. Like I think he can do it. It's just a matter of, can he do it for long stretches of time? And I think that he can do it. I think the Chiefs have just had the luxury last season and early this year that they didn't need him to do it. Now they need him to do it. So all those reps he was taking off the last year and a half, like that's built up to this moment and this stretch they're about to go on, because they need Kelce to be that guy again.
Serta's not allowed to clip this for socials, but I'm gonna say imposter. And it's not because I don't think that Travis Kelce is going to be a good player for the Chiefs the rest of the year. I absolutely do. And I think for that 3 to 4 week stretch during the postseason, when they need him to show up the most, he's 100% going to be capable of doing that for you then. But the reason why I think you cannot just take the wait and see approach this year is because I don't think you can have him, Travis Kelce, be your number one option the rest of the season. I just don't think you can. I think he's got to be a guy that's getting a few targets a week. 4 or 5 is probably what you want him to see. You want him to limit the number of hits that he's taking over the course of the season and then get him to January healthy. And if you can do that, season success. That's it. Get to 10, 11 plus wins. Get Travis Kelce to the postseason healthy. Have him fresh, ready to go when you need him the most. And at that point, he'll be capable. Like this week, I anticipate a pretty big Travis Kelce game. I think Kelce will be good. You've got a bye week coming up. You know you need him. He can get answers next week. You can get answers next week on what's going on with Rashee Rice. But after that, I think this team needs to add. And I think part of why is because I think it's an imposter that Kelce can be their number one option the rest of the way. You've got to find somebody else that can do that for you. So for me, it's an imposter.
Maybe it's Ron's guy, Jared Wiley. Maybe Jared Wiley's finally gonna get in the mix here and get some real opportunities.
This is the week. This is the week that it happens. They'll go to 13 personnel. I'm sure that'll be the case. All right. Let's finish this thing out, Serda. Our prediction for the week. Monday Night Football, Arrowhead Stadium, Chiefs versus Saints. Chiefs are a 5-point favorite right now in Vegas. What do you see happening in this one?
I'm just no longer going to pick the Chiefs to score a lot of points. Like until that actually happens and until they actually like win something by double digits and convincingly, like I'm just going to assume that every game is going to be close. It's going to come down to the very end and it's going to be annoying and frustrating, filled with mistakes and penalties and issues. And then at the end of the day, they're going to make enough plays. They're going to get Harrison Butker in field goal range, and they're going to win the game at the last minute. And I don't have a ton of faith in the Saints offense. I do think that they're good and they've got players, but at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs defense is just way more talented than what the Saints have offensively, especially with Derek Carr as their quarterback. So I still think the Chiefs find a way to get it done, but I think it's going to be another close nail biter because that seems to be all they know how to play anymore. So I think the Chiefs are going to win, but I think it's going to be 20-17.
Yeah, I'm with you on the not scoring a bunch of points. They've scored more than 27 points 3 times since the start of last season. Choosing to or expecting them to score more than that at this point just feels foolish. I'm going to go with the Chiefs win this one. I think it's an annoying game. You're going to be frustrated at times, especially in the first half. The Saints are probably going to score on their first drive because everybody scores on their first drive against the Chiefs, and then the Chiefs don't allow anything after that. I think the Chiefs end up winning this thing 23-13. They cover the spread. It's an annoying game, but they end up winning it, and that's typically how things have gone so far this year for your Kansas City Chiefs. And then we head into the bye week. We get some important news on Rashee Rice, find out how long he's expected to be out. It'll be at least a month. Only 3 games are expected to be played during that month, though. So we'll see what happens with Rashee Rice. We'll see what happens with them potentially on the trade market as well. It has been a pleasure to be with you guys today. It is Show and BK on the Chiefs for Stephen Serda. I'm Brandon Kiley. We will talk to you next week. Until then, we are out of here.